Can you hear me? Yeah.
Good morning. Can everybody hear me? Wonderful. Hello, my name is Rachel Solomon-Williams, and I'm the Executive Director at the Aldersgate Group. I'll wait until everyone's got their headphones on and can actually hear me. I'm very pleased to be moderating this panel on major brand transformations. As we're at Reset Connect, net zero is of course a central transformation theme for major brands, but companies are also facing the need to transform across a range of other key areas as well. It's really exciting that we'll be hearing from representatives of 5 influential brands about how they are approaching transformations on some of these pressing issues. Major brands play a vital role in shaping the future of business strategy across the economy, so I'm looking forward to some great insights on what we can expect to see in the coming months and years. So moving around our panellists, we've got Adam Elman, who's Head of Sustainability for EMEA at Google, Jeremy Mathieu, who's Head of Sustainability at ITV, Karen Flug, who's CSO at IKEA, Tim Lambert, CEO at Osapiens. Sorry, you're not CEO. You can introduce yourself properly, Tim, in a minute. Tim, as you can see, is not called Alberto, and he has graciously stepped in for Alberto today. And Chris Norbury, who's CEO at E.ON UK. I will allow panellists to introduce themselves in more detail when they answer their first question. We're planning to have a conversation here to begin with, and then we'll go to Q&A with all of you. So please be thinking about your questions for the panellists as we have our conversation up here. So our starting question is, what has your company's overall approach been to transformation, bearing in mind the rapid pace of change on this range of issues, including net zero? Starting with Adam.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone. So Adam Elman, I'm part of Google's global sustainability team, and I lead our work across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. At Google, we believe we have a unique opportunity to help lead the transition to a more sustainable future, and we do that through what we do best, building innovation, driving technology, and making information available and making it useful. And this mission has only got more urgent, as has the climate crisis. But this opportunity for us extends much more beyond our own 4 walls and our own operations. We want to help others through our technology and our platforms to help their own sustainability goals. And we know this is important. We get to see what people are looking for. And actually, if you look at search trends over the last year, topics like electric vehicles, how do I recycle, solar panels, heat pumps have reached an all-time high. So we know individuals care about this. We also speak to businesses, governments, cities every day, and every day we hear this is important. So we really want to be part of that transition. We think that AI is going to be a big part of the solution. We actually worked with Boston Consulting Group last year to look at the opportunity, particularly around AI. And the key takeaway is that existing technologies, if scaled, so not the breakthroughs that we might get tomorrow, next week, next year, but existing technologies, if scaled, have the opportunity to help reduce global greenhouse gas emissions by 10% by 2030. So there is a huge opportunity here, and then there's significant opportunities around adaptation and resiliency as well. So we're really focused on building those solutions to help others. There are 3 particular areas where we see the most opportunity. One around information, one around optimization, and one around prediction. So just to give you very brief examples, and you may have used some of these solutions yourself. So for example, if you use Google Maps today, we have a whole range of AI solutions, such as helping drivers get around more sustainably. So if you've plotted a driving route, you may have seen a little green leaf pop up. That's using AI to surface up the most fuel-efficient route, if not already the fastest. And since we launched that 2 years ago, it's helped users avoid 2.4 million metric tons of emissions. That's the same as taking 500,000 fuel-based cars off the road every single day. So that's one example on the information side. On the optimization side, I'll stick with road transport. We're working with cities to use AI to help them understand small changes they can make to traffic junctions. So if you're sitting at traffic lights, it may be frustrating, but it's also very bad for the environment. In fact, stop-start traffic is 29 times worse from an emissions perspective. We've deployed this in 12 cities now, 30 million cars a month, and we've been able to reduce start-stop traffic by 30% and emissions by 10%. And cities love this because this is just small changes they make, no big investment, and we can see almost in real time, is it having the effect that we want it to have? And then finally on prediction, and the first 2 examples I gave you were all around mitigation. As I say, we also need to deal with a changing climate. We're using AI to predict flooding. Flooding affects 250 million people every single year. Huge financial consequences, but often consequences to life as well. We're now able to predict riverine flooding up to 7 days in advance using AI. We've deployed this to 80 countries around the world, covering 460 million people. And the advances in AI have meant we can actually deploy this in parts of the world where data is really scarce, often parts of the world who have been most impacted, but the technology is so good we can deploy it now. So that's just some of the examples around the work we're doing to help others transform. Internally, we have our own big ambitious goals. We're aiming for net zero by 2030, and actually that's supported by an ambitious goal on clean energy. We already match our electricity use with clean energy on an annual basis, but we're aiming to go to what we call 24/7 carbon free. So locally sourced clean energy every single day, every single hour. So I'm sure we can get into more detail, but a bit of a summary.
Thanks, Adam. That's very exciting. I can't decide whether it's very exciting or also terrifying, but good to hear about. Thank you. I'll pass to Jeremy from ITV.
Lovely, thank you very much. Some similar themes in terms of approaching a transition, both for us as a business internally, but also how do we support the transition. And for us, that means looking at our audience. How do we shape culture for good? This is a very intrinsic to the values and the identity of ITV. But also, how do we support the transition of businesses out there through our advertising, and how do we help to provide the best platform for those messages to land with audiences and to shape that transition in the economy as well. So. ITV is a £4 billion business, split in half, two halves. One is a global production company. So we make TV programs across the world. We sell to broadcasters and streamers everywhere. Some of the challenge there is around, how do we grow, how do we produce more whilst reducing our emissions in absolute terms? So, very fragmented supply chain there. Very creative. We like to think we're quite special because we're in the creative and craft business. So every production is unique and different. So that provides challenges. And then the other half of the business is obviously the channels and the streaming platforms where we provide content watched by millions of people that draws advertising revenue. So for us, the three main points I want to talk about in terms of the transformation. The first one is, how do we set ourselves up internally to ensure that we align business goals with climate goals? And I think that's a challenge that we're all facing to some degree, and that's kind of like a process in itself. That's we need to approach it as a change process really. And for that, the TPT framework, the Transition Plan Task Force framework, has been incredibly helpful for us. So we published our first transition plan earlier this year. It's not a finished product. It's very much where we are right now and how do we plan to approach it in the future. But it's been incredibly helpful to help us learn, but also to bring different parts of the climate journey together. So until then, we had TCFD over there, we had net zero over there, we had our content pledge over there. It's enables us to bring everything together and to start to draw the priorities around how do we drive value for the business while doing all this kind of stuff. And then, bringing people from risk, strategy, finance, and others, the board, audit and risk committee, to the table around a one conversation. So that process itself, it takes a lot of our time and a lot of effort at the moment to make sure that we do that well. Second point around transformation, we're not going to manage the transformation by ourselves. Collaboration across industry is absolutely critical. It's true for all sectors, I suppose, but for us especially, over 60% of our emissions come from TV production activities, which we don't really control. So how do we work with BAFTA Albert Consortium here in the UK and others internationally to agree on how do we measure carbon on production? This is step one. How do we make sure we have accurate data for the production activity we do, and how do we transform the infrastructure for the industry in order to drive genuine change toward net zero? That takes time. It's a bit painful at times, but it's an important step to make sure that we're all working in the same direction. And the third point, as I started to mention, is around the impact that we have around culture and society. 3 years ago, we signed something called the Content Climate Pledge that we initiated with all the broadcasters here in the UK and internationally, which is committing to doing more to support the audiences on their journey towards net zero, providing information that is based on science, meeting the audience where they are. So it's not about lecturing them, doing documentaries on climate change and how bad things are, but actually, entertaining them first because that's what the audience wants, but weaving in the kind of normalizing the solutions, inspiring people, and so on and so forth. So we're doing more and more across all genres, and by putting that as a creative challenge for our commissioners and producers, suddenly you can all kinds of new solutions that people are coming up with, from storylines on air pollution in the soaps to sustainable fashion segments in daytime and so on. And alongside the content side of things, the advertising obviously is something that we're very active in. We found out that of our top 100 advertisers, about 80% had science-based targets in place or some version of transition, in place. So for us, from a risk conversation, which is how we approach it, suddenly becomes more of an opportunity conversation. If there's going to be more and more companies, trying to communicate on their transition, how can we help them? How can we support them? And so we're putting a lot of in place within our commercial teams to make sure that, one, our revenue is resilient in the future, because we're approaching the brands that are going to be more active in that transition, but also we can contribute to that positive impact along the way as well. So that's kind of like an overview of what transformation means for us.
Thank you, Jeremy. It might be good to unpack a bit about the transition plan process later in this conversation, because it's great to hear from an early adopter, and I know it's been really powerful for lots of companies. Karen.
Thank you. I'm fascinated also what Jeremy and Adam have been saying, because I think even though we're in a completely different industry at IKEA, just the connectivity around how do we drive societal impact and positive change and how we can influence through big brands. So I'm the global CSO of Inca Group, which is the IKEA's largest retailer, including the retail here in the UK, which obviously I hope most of you are familiar with from a brand point of view. And actually, sustainability runs deep in our DNA. It originally started back in the 1940s when Ingvar Kamprad in Sweden set up the company. Being resource smart, Småland, where he's from in Sweden, is very like Yorkshire or Scotland. I can say that. I'm married to a Scot and I'm from Yorkshire. We're very, very careful with money. So he was very much about no waste, really being careful with resources. He created flat pack furniture, which you'll all know and either love or hate, but was created in order to save money when you transport the furniture. We used to say, or we still say actually, you don't ship air at IKEA. So by having the furniture flat packed, that actually meant that we were being good for the environment as well, before we even knew that that was a thing many, many years ago. We had our first environmental policy in the early 90s, and then we now have overall People and Planet Positive strategy, which we're driving, and we continuously update that. So it has been ingrained in the culture for a long time, but it still requires a lot of transformational change, of course. We are a commercial business, we still want to be profitable, and that's important to us. But it's also good to know we're set up as a foundation. So a little bit like the Patagonia example that a lot of people have talked about the last couple of years. We did it in the 80s, where we are set up as an organization where either the money gets reinvested back into the business or it goes to our IKEA Foundation, which is our charitable arm. And that means we can think long term. We've been committed to Paris since the Paris Agreement, and we're looking at how we've just got our science-based targets approved by the SBTi organization with the new science. That means we have to halve our emissions by 2030 and then 90% by 2050 to reach net zero. So we're busy on that track there. And actually, since we set our baseline in 2016, we've managed to reduce the CO2 emissions by nearly 25%, whilst growing almost 31% in revenue. So we have shown that you can decouple the carbon greenhouse gas emissions and have profitable business as well, so that we can say that it's good business to be a good business. It's also a good business because our customers demand it. We run a survey with GlobeScan, and they have very much told us they expect businesses and governments to do something about climate change, both helping them to make better choices, but also to do, look after our own backyard, our own house. So we need to get that in order. So yeah, over 2/3 of the customers we surveyed in all the countries where we operate have told us that. And it's even more prevalent when we talk to the youth, the younger people care passionately. But the biggest reasons they don't act themselves is because they see sustainability as too expensive. So one of the big jobs that we have, we like to be an affordable brand, which hopefully most of you realize. We want to be able to say to people that you don't have to have a lot of money to live sustainably. So affordability and sustainability hand in hand. And then if we think about driving sustainability and particularly driving the climate agenda in our business, we do it in 4 main ways. What we do in our own operations and how we run the business, what we do with our customers and what they offer to our customers, both products, services, but also know-how and knowledge. We have an Inca investments arm, and we also, of course, drive advocacy, being on panels like this, trying to work together with other brands, but also with policymakers as well. And in our own operations, when we look at that, part of the reason we've been able to achieve the results that we have is really that switch to renewable heating and cooling, renewable electricity, where in 28 of our countries out of 31 where we operate, we've got 100% of our stores running on renewable electricity with over 1 million solar panels on the roof. And when we had the energy crisis a couple of winters ago, it actually made sure that our stores were profitable. Suddenly the payback is really good from a financial incentive point of view, as well as it making good sense from a sustainability aspect. So it's about talking the same language to business people and finance people as well. We're switching to zero emission delivery trucks as well for all our deliveries for home, and we're really aiming to amplify that and get that out, particularly in the cities around the world, and we're doing a good job in both Europe and China are leading the way there, so that's fantastic to see. Halving our waste as well, food waste, and also our operational waste. So many things going on throughout the business. But I think from a transformation point of view, it's really about the mindset shift and how do we bring business leaders along with us. So we've done some climate training, and we have what we call value creation goals, which is like a balanced scorecard of KPIs, where we don't just talk about the typical business financial metrics, but we also talk about happy customers, co-worker engagement, CO2 emissions, and you know, the waste and other things that I've already mentioned. So I think it's really about integrating it into the daily business decisions that really help us to drive that change. And also, I think it's our job to lead with optimism. There's a lot of doom and gloom. In one of our climate trainings for our senior leaders, we had Johan Rockström present to us. And if any of you have seen the program Breaking Boundaries and listened to him speak, it's very heavy on the heart and the head about the state of the world and the various planetary boundaries and the tipping points we're reaching. But then we also know many of the solutions exist today. So if we all collaborate and come together and lead with that sense of agency that we can make a difference, whoever you are, you know, a customer who changes to plant-based meals or chooses to walk or cycle instead of driving 1 day a week or something like that, it does matter, and it's getting that across to our customers as well as our co-workers.
Thank you, Karen. Lots of food for thought there. I'll go to Chris next, actually, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure. No, Chris Norbury, Chief Executive of E.ON UK. Thank you for joining us this morning. For us at E.ON, then, fundamentally, we're in the business of the energy transition. So we are led by our purpose, which is to make new energy work, make the new renewable energy system work for the customers that we serve and the societies that we're part of. You know, for us, what that means is making sure that energy is both affordable and sustainable, and a fundamental belief that if done well, the energy transition can be a force for good and can create social value. And indeed, if it doesn't create social value and large swathes of society are left behind, then there won't be an energy transition and we won't achieve the goals that we're all setting out to achieve. From there, then, I think for us what really matters is ensuring that the business that we're in and the work that we do is congruent with that purpose. So just for example, you know, for us, we span off and then divested our fossil power generation, our upstream position, our trading house in 2016. So you know, the business that you're in being congruent matters. In terms of the work that we do and the work that we choose to do, the work that we choose to bid for. So if I take the example of our energy infrastructure business here in the UK, then you know, my favourite project, there are many, but my favourite project, hope there's no colleagues here, is the work that we're doing with the Queen's Medical Centre in Nottingham, which is the second largest hospital in the UK. It's the size of a small town. The project there is doing a number of things. One is putting in a new energy system, which is based around 64 boreholes drilled into the aquifer in Nottingham to generate heat and chill. It's putting in a new energy management system into the hospital. And it's also replacing all of the windows in the hospital. And the reason that we're doing that is to ensure that the new energy system works and that the building fabric is up to scratch to make sure that the new energy system works. That project is taking 10,000 tonnes of CO2 out of the atmosphere every year. That project is reducing the trust's energy bills on a sustainable basis. It's creating 200 good jobs in Nottingham at the peak of the project. But the reason why I love it is because if you go to the hospital, you go into one of the wards where we've done the work, and then that ward is the right ambient temperature. It's quiet because of the new windows, so the patients can sleep. You go into a ward where we haven't done the work. It's damp, it's noisy, the windows are open, the patients can't sleep. So because of the energy transition, the quality of patient care at that hospital is getting better. The first time I went there, I thought I went round with the trust CFO, and I thought he was going to talk to me about, project delays and the finances, and all he wanted to do was take me into wards and open windows and show me how wonderful it was for patient care, and that's heartening, and that's what you want to see. So there are plenty of other examples, but that's the one for me that brings home what the energy transition should be. We don't always get it right in our business. We've still got a way to go, but that's what we're setting out to achieve.
That's fantastic, Chris. Thank you. And now we move to Tim, who's got a really exciting kind of slightly complementary story, I think it's fair to say.
Yes, thanks everyone. And fascinating insights into these great brands and what you guys are all doing. Really inspiring, and I think I'll pull on a couple of those examples as we go. The background of my business, just briefly, is we have guys who have spent their lives trying to improve the visibility, sustainability, transparency of supply chains. Supply chains being the things that drive many of the brands that you see here. And in particular, we spend a lot of time in critical infrastructure like food, pharmaceutical, medicines. So I think when the EU has played you have to pay respect to the EU's desire to bring in regulations that have caused challenge for businesses, but are necessary regulations like a fist on the table to say we need to make these changes. A lot of the largest brands in the world, as you hear, are already making those changes anyway, because they are driving the sustainability agenda in an incredibly positive way. But this is bringing the rest of the markets in line, and it's hugely exciting. And then the link with our business and where it gets really exciting for us is we were able to apply knowledge gained over many, many years in track and trace, traceability, pretty deep tech technology, create a platform which is enabling our customers, who include some of the largest retailers in the world, manufacturers, mid-sized organizations, you name it, to actually get compliant fast with the regulations at product level, at business level, but also drive operational excellence so that the kind of stakeholders that were mentioned here are also able to use it at board level as a solution to kind of help them drive sustainable KPIs. So in essence, some of our customers refer to us as the Office 365 for ESG, where you could turn on modules as you need them. But truly, I think, just to match what Adam said about AI, so much of what we do, all of it, what we do is driven by AI. AI has a huge role to play in helping us to solve major problems at scale, or major opportunities at scale. And I think I've had a window into it not being cautious optimism, not being all doom and gloom. We have to take action. We are taking action. But I'm seeing some of the work done by some of the governing bodies at the EU, like EFRAG, and there is real impact happening. So there's real cause for hope. And we want to play the role of helping, being the platform that helps some of the largest, the at scale, mid-sized companies, everyone, to really help them to transform sustainably. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Tim. Yeah, that sounds very exciting. Thinking about some of the themes that have come through in those opening remarks, one that stood out for me is the public engagement piece and social value creation. I think it'd be really good to explore that in a little bit more detail, particularly, what are the challenges around that as well? How is it going with engaging the public on this transition? Are they keen for you to be making that journey, or is there resistance, and how does that work? Don't have to go around in the same order. Where should we go first?
Karen,
Karen,
I can step in.
yes.
Yeah, I mentioned the survey, the GlobeScan survey before. So our customers definitely tell us that they expect us to make a difference, and also other businesses and governments. But I think where we need to hit a sweet spot with them to drive their individual action is actually around making it beneficial for them. There's one element is the greater good, but when it comes to crunch time and it's about the health and well-being of your family and yourself, or about the money that you have in your wallet, then that's when crunch time comes in terms of their decision. So things that we're doing to try and drive that is really looking at how we encourage second-hand and buyback and bringing back IKEA products, and then we resell it on, giving things a second life. So really driving the circular economy together with our customers, and also plant-based meals. I mentioned Johan Rockström earlier, and I said, what's the biggest thing one individual can do to make a difference? And he said, well, there's two things. One is talk about it more. When you have the information, share it, because there's so much disinformation and misinformation. And I think it was the WEF global risks for 2024 put that as the number one risk this year, was the misinformation part. And then the other part is really about making it affordable with things like plant-based meals, is that he felt that IKEA was doing a good job. But it's not about waving a stick and making people feel guilty about eating meat. It's about saying eat less red meat and have a balanced flexitarian diet. And that's what one individual can do to make a difference. So we've brought in plant-based meals. 600 million, nearly 700 million people eat IKEA food every year. So we're in the sort of top 5 or 6 of the biggest restaurant chains in the world. So we can have an impact there. And we make sure it's a lower price than the meat-based alternative. So we're really helping customers make those choices that way it's the guilt part, I think, is we need to avoid.
That cost part is really important, isn't it? Take them with you. Thank you. Chris?
I mean, my daughters like me to take them to IKEA to eat your food. But just to the point in terms of affordability and the point in terms of customer and public engagement. So, not dissimilar. So YouGov recently did a survey for us, 10,000 people across the UK. So not just our customers, 10,000 people across the UK. And a couple of things that it told us was this. So over a clear majority, over 66% of people, I think from memory, believed that investment in the energy transition was insufficient, and the speed at which the energy transition was being delivered was too slow. So whatever the kind of political noise, that's a pretty representative sample, as I understand it, for a poll. And people wanted the energy transition to be delivered more quickly and at greater scale. The two obstacles that it highlighted, or the two challenges it highlighted, were only 8% of people believed that their community was sufficiently engaged in how those investments were being made. It doesn't, the obvious one, which is, I want you to help me with affordability. I want you to help me. I want to do these things. I want to participate. How can you make it affordable? So the two, and then when asked, who do you see as being responsible for addressing those challenges? The answer was not central government. The answer was my local community and businesses. So, that was quite telling. In terms of what we can do about that, and again, these are just examples. We certainly don't profess to have the perfect answer. In terms of the community engagement and in terms of engaging with people at a level that's meaningful for them, then one example would be we've recently signed a strategic energy partnership with the City of Coventry. It's a 15-year partnership. The destination is a zero-carbon city. The premise is using the power of the energy transition to regenerate the City of Coventry. But what it enables you to do is really understand the energy needs of that city as you play forward, picking up the point that's been made there, with working with partners to deploy technology such as AI to help us do that, to work with community groups in the city, to target, for example, insulation at wards within the city where you've got poorer quality housing, where you've got underprivileged communities, and you can deliver that far more efficiently because what you're doing is sharing data with the local community in a way that you can't at the moment with central government. So the the opportunity and the ability to engage at a community level, at a city level, I think is hugely important. And then the other is, how do you make the type of solutions that enable an individual or an individual household to participate in the energy transition affordable? So, right now, the way that the market works in the UK is that those solutions, fundamentally solar, battery, heat pump, etc., are affordable for a relatively small section of society, a relatively small niche in society, possibly not those who need the benefit that they bring the most. And how do you overcome that obstacle? So, models such as energy on subscription, offering those solutions as a subscription model to avoid the upfront capital cost, those sort of things I think will become hugely important as we move forward.
Thank you very much. Jeremy?
If I can jump in as well on this, obviously the audience, the public is very important for us. Very much echo some of the points made around, we hear from, surveys, the audience cares about climate, the audience cares about the transition, but it doesn't really translate into, let's make lots of programs about climate change, or let's lecture people, or let's tell them how bad it is. People want, if we try to make programs like that, people switch off, they go somewhere else, because people go home and watch TV to be entertained, to escape from the reality and all this kind of stuff. So for us, it's been a bit of a interesting journey over the last few years to think about creatively, how do we engage them? How do we meet them where they are? How do we provide them the entertainment, the kind of the lifestyle, the connection that they seek, but whilst weaving in those themes. And some of the best examples we've had, at the moment, or just about to kick off, I think, we have a show called Cooking with the Stars, which is, celebrities, food, but we have, two of the contestants, one is vegan, one is vegetarian. So it's a way of taking a show that people love, people watch, millions of people come in and join, but you normalize the idea that, hey, this vegan meal looks really cool, why don't I try that? And then providing potential platform for brands who have, vegan lines to share, to sell. It's like, hey, isn't that a good place for us to communicate our message? So we're trying to create the opportunities for this conversation to enter the mainstream a lot more. My favorite example, probably the most successful example we've had in recent years, is a partnership between Love Island and eBay around pre-loved fashion. Love Island used to be associated with kind of, fast fashion. eBay was trying to get into, kind of second-hand fashion, but, was maybe struggling to get there. Taking a well-loved show watched by millions and millions of people and kind of normalizing this idea that, yes, you can buy some really cool outfits that's been bought by worn by someone else. And that's really drove change in the way people approach this, from a mental, mindset perspective. How do we approach, second-hand clothing and pre-loved fashion, I should say. So for us, it's very much about finding the opportunities from a creative perspective. And then the last point on this is that it's not a once and done job, right? I think what the main learning for us is that all these creative people who are on the front end of making this content, it's taking a few years for them to feel more comfortable with it. But once we go there, once we have examples that we can see others doing, we see, Netflix doing something cool, BBC does something cool, why don't we learn and try something else as well? And then the point is, like, it's important for us to find our voice in this. And now I would say, the ITV voice on the matter is different from the BBC, the Channel 4 voice, and so on voice. And I think it takes time for all these brands to find their voice in this evolving transition. It's not something we say, okay, this is when it's going to be, because the landscape changes, the audience changes and so on. So, but you can only find that voice and experiment by getting out there and trying. And sort of putting out messages and finding out what you stand for and so on. So it's very much a journey of changing the messages and meeting the audience where they are.
Thank you very much. Adam?
2 points very briefly, because I'm conscious of time, but just picking up Jeremy's point. So we have YouTube as a business, and this opportunity to meet people where they're at is hugely important. We know people are interested in making more sustainable choices. They're certainly not going to be looking at me for advice, and I'm certainly not going to be the person that's going to help influence them. But actually, if you're into cooking and you follow a YouTube creator that's a chef, or you're into architecture or makeup or fashion, what have you, that's where a lot of people are going to pick up the cues from and take signals from. And so we work with the creator community to help empower them and give them the confidence to talk about and integrate sustainability into what they do. So we see that as a hugely exciting opportunity. We also take YouTube creators to events like COP to, again, help democratize and help to get that message out to a different and a wider audience. But also just bringing this back to the information piece again. So because we know people want to make choices, but often these choices are quite complex. They don't know what to do. They don't know what the right decision to make is. So at Google, we're trying to empower them with that information so they can make those more sustainable choices. So if you go onto Google and you're looking to take a flight, I appreciate not the most sustainable form of transport, we surface up the emissions associated with each flight. So you can choose a flight with a lower emission. But we're going further now, so actually we'll now say, if appropriate, by the way, I know you're looking for a flight, but there is a train that's actually not too dissimilar in terms of cost and not too dissimilar in terms of time that could save your emissions as well. So again, we're not enforcing what someone does, but we're trying to give them the information and that context so they can make those more sustainable choices. And we see a lot of opportunity in this space, particularly around electrification, new heat sources, all those sorts of things.
Great, thank you. Chris, Tim.
Thank you. Just following on from Adam's point about the consumer choice, rightly, consumers are demanding more information about the provenance, for example, of the food that they buy, you guys buy in the supermarkets. So a huge project that we're working on, we're really proud to be working on, is in Germany, if you go to most of the major supermarkets, we won't name them, and you pick up the food, it's our technology that we've provided that you can see the provenance of where that apple or vegetable or meat came from, so you can make those choices. So that's, I suppose, a practical way that we're trying to give back. Thank you.
Fantastic. I think it would be good to go to questions from the audience. If anybody has any, please raise your hand and a microphone will come to you. Otherwise, I can keep asking questions. But, brilliant. And I think somebody is going to come and help take Chris's mic to the person. Or you could just pass it over. Yeah. Seamless.
Thank you so much.
Could
Hi.
you say your name and where you're from as well, please?
Absolutely. My name is Laura Donahue. I'm a senior design researcher with Sutherland Labs. And was actually really delighted to hear the impact that customer experience and user experience research and feedback has been integrated into the kinds of solutions that you guys are delivering. And I was just wondering, when it comes to kind of, again, like the more customer facing, maybe in terms of like help or chatbots and things like that, where people are trying to get support on the products and services that you guys offer, how are you guys integrating that feedback to make those decisions, a little less complex, like Adam was saying earlier?
Thank you. Chris?
Happy to start off. It's a great question, and I don't pretend to have the perfect answer, but just some examples. So, people don't typically love getting their energy bill. Yeah, people don't love their energy bill as a product, and that's a challenge. It's a challenge both in terms of affordability, helping people understand what they're being charged for, what they're spending their money on, what they're consuming. It's also a challenge in terms of sustainability. People understanding their energy consumption is hugely important. So one of the things that we've done is we've applied some machine learning to the customer feedback that we get, both in terms of what customers tell us and also in terms of the online behaviour that we observe. 80% of our customers engage with us online only, out of the 6 million customers in the UK. So looking at the online behaviour, looking at where people are hovering over certain parts of their energy bill at that kind of nitty-gritty level. We've got the team have a struggle score, which I'm sure many of you will understand better than I, but it tells us where the customers are struggling to understand what their bill's telling them. We've then launched a product called Billy, which has now been deployed to just over 1 million customers. To date, it will be deployed to all 6 million customers in the UK, which has fundamentally changed the way their bill looks, where the tone of voice, the language that's used, but it's also making that bill interactive, so they can click on parts of that bill, they can understand their consumption, they can understand where their energy's coming from, and they can understand the health of their account. And then we've started to gamify their account health, so if they need to submit a meter reading, if there's some other data points that we're missing to help serve that customer, then and all of that, whilst it might sound as if it's disconnected from the topic of sustainability, is actually fundamentally important in helping every customer understand how much am I using, what am I paying for, what does my consumption look like, and then off there starting to build on, here's some advice as to how you can use energy differently, here's some advice as to how you can use less energy, and in doing so make it more affordable and make it more sustainable, because it may sound perverse as an energy company, but we want people to use less energy.
I can just, so when you said Billy, I was thinking the Billy bookcase. It's quite iconic. We're actually doing a test in Sweden with spot pricing app for electricity, so that customers can look at how it's going even throughout the day and then choose when to charge up the car, when to use the dishwasher and washing machine and so on. Just a test in Sweden right now, but it's something we're looking at because we have a Home Smart where everybody can connect their lights and all their appliances in their home and manage them via the IKEA app and so on. So we're really interested to see how, as you say, the best energy is the energy people don't use in terms of driving to the clean energy transition. But then less about AI, I suppose, but more about helping customers make choices. In all of our stores around the world, we have a sustainable living shop, which is a dedicated area which is helping customers make better choices around saving water, food waste, and how to look after leftovers and stop your food going off so much, saving energy. In many of the markets we sell home solar as well, options, and some heat pumps in some markets. Energy saving devices, water saving devices, but also we talk about the money they can save. With greenwashing legislation, which is a really good thing, we make sure we substantiate all our claims so that you know what you're comparing from and to if you switch to using this. And it can be that the customer doesn't need to buy anything from us. It's about using our life at home knowledge to help them understand how they make better choices at home. And we're moving that to online now as well. But we're still, even though we're an omni-channel retailer, we still very much believe in the sort of physical discussions and helping customers once they're touching and feeling the products. But we definitely need to connect more on the AI, I think, and the power that can have in helping.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've given a few examples already. Just to sort of widen, I mean, we do hardware as well, so if you come across things like the Nest Learning Thermostat, less about information, it's just automating things so that actually individuals don't have to worry about it. Nest has been out a decade, 115 billion kilowatt hours of energy avoided through Nest. But for us, our customers are very wide. We have billions of people that use search, maps, YouTube every day, but we also have companies, governments, cities that use our technology. So for example, the City of Dublin is using our transport data to help inform their policy and infrastructure changes to increase cycling in the city. You've got companies like Unilever who are using our AI and geospatial data to help avoid deforestation for their commodity supply chain. So I think, in many cases, this is the power of the technology is either enabling something which is already done but is done pretty manually and pretty poorly and really advancing it, or in many cases doing things that just weren't possible before and really leapfrogging. So I think we think the opportunity is significant. I do want to be clear here, technology and AI is not the silver bullet, by the way. It's a part of the solution. There are obviously many other things. We've touched on collaboration, we've touched on just doing the hard graft, but I as I say, a lot of opportunity if deployed at scale.
Thank you. Either of the other two? No. Next question, please. Oh, lots of questions now. Let's go to the gentleman in the blue shirt over there.
Hello, Leonid Nchparenko, Health and Foods. My question is related to the new legislation that's coming up. It will be probably, we'll have different question to Tim and Adam, and other question to everyone else. So that's related to the new TNFD framework that's been introduced, and obviously it needs lots amounts of data from the supply chain, getting that the data. Part of the data is open source, but it's really hard to get it, and another part is obviously some internal things. So my question to Tim and Adam would be, what are the options like to provide customer or businesses with that sustainability data. And a question to everyone else is, how are you planning to get that value chain data? Because that's really, really interesting story, and I believe everyone would like to hear it.
Thank you. For
Thank you.
anyone not familiar, it's the Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. I'm sure you're all very familiar. Shall we start with Tim?
Adam, you go ahead.
No, absolutely. So primarily we have a platform called Google Earth, which you might have seen before. But Google Earth is a planetary scale geospatial platform with petabytes worth of data, almost real-time live satellite data. And that's been available to researchers and scientists for many, many years. A lot of the peer-reviewed environmental science is based on using that platform. A number of years ago, we opened that up to commercial entities. And so, many organisations are using that to help with TNFD and, EU deforestation regulations and lots of other things. I think it's important to say as well, at Google we develop our own solutions, but actually we're a platform through Google Cloud. So many other companies come and build solutions using our capabilities and our infrastructure. And so many of the big name platforms out there and startups and what have you are running on Google technology. So we try and support across the ecosystem.
Yeah, just that's funny enough in a much smaller way. That's a kind of similar model to what we're doing. Funny enough, I'm aware of your business more in the context of the EU deforestation-free regulation. I think the key thing is for the regulation side of it is getting your data, sort of your master data, in some kind of semblance of order, whether it's the GIS, EPCIS standard and things like that. But that's probably too much detail for now. But it is complex. We go back. I mean, the satellite information is available 40 years back, but and we're working with a lot of customers on that right now. But yeah, that's probably enough information for now for the wider group. Thank you.
And then as a company with a big and complex supply chain around the world, both regional and global, we've actually decided to be one of the early adopters of TNFD, working together with them. We are quite advanced with our climate agenda, as I mentioned earlier, made good progress over the last couple of decades, but we're still in the early stages on the nature side. And I would say more the other part of our business that drives the supply chain side, a company called IKEA, that's a slightly separate arm where I have worked for a few years before this role. The biggest impact we can have on nature is through the supply chain. So really looking particularly with the food that I spoke about, but also our forestry agenda for our wood products, the textile industry, whether that's cotton and linen and so on as well. And of course the impact with water, so biodiversity and water. But then the retail part that I am in the organisation of now, we are a large company with big buildings around the world, so we also need to look at what's our impact on nature. So for us, we are still, yes, we've said we're going to be early adopters and work together with them and learn, and part of the advocacy role of them bringing other brands when they see big known brand names doing it, that we want to help everyone join the party. But we're still in the early stages, and one of those reasons is the complexity of the data that Tim mentioned as well, of getting hold of that when you've got a supply chain that's evolved organically over 80 years with a lot of manual data still. So.
Just to jump in, maybe offer a different perspective, we're quite asset-light business, and our supply chain is not as complex as some other companies. There's a bit of timber here and there, a bit of tech here and there, but for us, that we had a point, quite early days in our nature journey, but we're at a point of having to decide, do we put a lot of resources into going to the nth degree of providing data? How material is that versus trying to put the resources we have towards educating the audience, trying to improve our risk assessments when we go filming on different locations, and budgets are tight, budgets are limited. How do we put our effort and resources? And at the moment, it feels like very much aware of the biodiversity and nature crisis. Wanting to do the right thing, but for a business like ourselves, where do we focus our efforts right now? And trying to find that right balance between having perfect data versus focusing on the impact that we can have, but also trying to inform that impact with data. So it's, it's complex. We don't have the solution, but different perspective from a different type of business.
Really challenging. Thank you. Take a question from this side. Got the lady at the front here.
Hello, my name's Dania from Pineapple Sustainable Partnerships. Jeremy, you sparked off this question. It was about the CSO's role internally, I guess. I've heard that a lot of CSOs are experiencing burnout, you're firefighting, there's obviously so much to do on the reporting side. And yeah, it seems that when money is tight, budget is cut from that department. Just wondering if I know you're supposed to be waving the flag for your organization, but if you could speak candidly about, perhaps the struggles you face as a CSO and how you are viewed by other departments and the board.
One thing we did at IKEA is make all the country managers CSOs. And it wasn't just symbolic that we did that. We actually wanted them to take ownership in the business. Instead of, yes, I run a separate department, what we call group sustainability, group function within the sort of what we would call head office. But by making every single manager who leads the country and is in charge of driving revenue, in charge of hiring the right people with the right culture and values, happy customers, all the legal implications that come with running, the US or China or the UK for IKEA, they are also chief sustainability officers. So we put it right there on their agenda, and many of them are really proud of that. When you look at their profiles on LinkedIn, they say they're the CEO and CSO of the organization. So that has helped us to really help the transformation to land it in the business. But you're right, it doesn't mean it's easy. We are juggling the short-termism, the cost of living crisis, energy crisis, geopolitics, rising inequality, all the things everybody is juggling, both as consumers and a business. And we want these great leaders to also be able to think long-term and do the right thing for climate, do the right thing on the people agenda around inequality and local societal impact as well. So it is a real challenge to try and balance that. But I think at IKEA we are fortunate that our board is in a hurry for us to get even faster and accelerate, and our CEO is, many of you know, hopefully know Jesper Brodin, and he sits on the WEF Climate Leaders CEO Alliance as co-chair. He's on the B team, and he's just been announced as UN Global Compact replacement as vice chair for Paul Polman. So when you have it anchored in the business at senior management level, then you keep the investment and the focus. So I know that's not simple and it's not easy with every organization, but it does help if it's intrinsically linked into the purpose of the organization.
I mean, just I guess to offer you the perspective of somebody who's responsible for a business, for us, so the business in the UK is sort of round numbers about a £17 billion turnover business. It's 10% of our group. We serve 1 in 5 homes in the UK. I am accountable for sustainability. The board of the UK business is accountable for sustainability, and to the point that's just been made, I couldn't reinforce, support that any more than, it's really important, because your question in terms of do budgets get cut, your question in terms of is there a disconnect between the business agenda, between the business that you're in, the work that you do, and sustainability. My personal perspective is that opens up when the people running that market, the people running that business unit, the board who are responsible don't feel that sense of accountability. And we're not always perfect. We don't always get it right. If I talk to Jo, our head of sustainability, sometimes she'll tear her hair out at me, and I've got to go back and I've got to rethink it because actually I'm accountable for it. To your question in terms of the level of stress that people feel, I only full of admiration for the people sat to my right who are in the role. I know our head of sustainability, Jo, it's really tough at the moment because the requirement for measurement, the requirement for transparency, the requirement to demonstrate what it is that we are doing ratchets up and up and up all the time, and that's a good thing. Measurement and transparency is a good thing, but then equally trying to balance that off against actually we've got to do as well as measure. We've got to execute as well as report. And that I know for the team can be really tough, and requires us to constantly look at, have we got the resource levels right, have we got the balance right, are we learning from what others are doing. I think it's a tough job, and I'm full of admiration for anybody who's in that role.
And maybe just to build on that, very good, important question. From a personal perspective, I think the role of sustainability has changed a lot over the last few years, and it continues to change. And I think the skills and competencies we need to have now is quite different from what it was a few years ago, and will continue to change. And I think I'm finding myself having to learn a lot more around not just sustainability stuff, but about how does business work. And increasingly, it's about bridging that gap between sustainability being over there and core business being here, and having to learn to speak risk and to speak finance and to speak strategy and to speak risk, governance and all this kind of stuff. And that's something that cannot be ignored, something that's part of how we develop in our roles, and how we interact with the business. And I think there's a big part of how we present ourselves to the business also is critical. When I started the role at ITV 3 years ago, I hammered the point that my role is about transforming the business with Fit to Thrive in a net zero future. It was about looking forward, thriving as a business. Not about just purely compliance or purely cutting carbon or anything like that. It's very much about being forward looking, and I think that resonated quite well, because it's about engaging in a trying to get everyone to look forward in the same direction rather than otherwise. Also, some of the challenges. I was chatting to other sustainability leaders recently. We're probably some of the only people in business who think about 2050. So we have to have a long-term perspective, as well as the immediate delivery, as well as trying to think all kinds of dimensions. So it is challenging, and there's no two ways about that. I think from an organizational perspective as well, the more you embed it within the culture and the governance, the more you empower people, the less pressure there is on you. And I see culture and governance as two sides of the same coin. Governance kind of like solidifies or kind of like structures how we approach it in terms of accountability, in terms of the processes and so on. But the culture is like what makes that all come to life, and all the stuff around incentives, all the stuff around the storytelling internally, how you sort of empower people, how do you rewards people from a kind of visibility perspective and so on. That's a big part of how we approach it nowadays. How do we make sure that you have the right governance, but that's supplemented by the right culture, and how do you make sure that you embed it as much as possible within the business. But that's another thing on the to-do list. So it just kind of gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I think Jeremy just summed it up very well. Look, if you meet a sustainability person that tell you their job's easy, then, well, I haven't met one. And I think it's got harder, and I think it's got harder because we've moved from, I've been doing this 20 years, we've moved from having a business and a team on the side that was doing some sustainability, and then a business that was running a business, to trying to transform business. It's a business transformation program, and change is hard. But if you look at the momentum, if you look at how many companies have net zero targets, if you look at the investment in clean energy, if you look at what the regulation's driving in terms of the teams that are having to get engaged, there is so much more momentum. You look at this event. My diary is full this week, as I suspect many are, because there is so much interest, there is so much opportunity. And I think Karen made this point about linking it to business purpose. Google, our purpose is to organise the world's information, make it universally useful and accessible. That's what we can do for sustainability. So yes, it's hard, but I think it's hard for a good reason. But I don't, we shouldn't be demotivated by that. I think there is so much momentum and so much opportunity, and I've seen time and time again that switch flick from someone saying, why are we doing this, to like a year later when they're ringing you up or sending an email going, why aren't we doing more? Why aren't we going faster? So I think I'm glass half full on it.
Tim.
And just one perspective, having had the opportunity to work with many CSOs as well, I think the satisfaction we get as a business is when we see the eyes light up and they recognise that there's a big chunk of some of the time-sucking elements of around regulation and navigating the different stakeholders within the organisation that we can materially help with. That's something that we get a lot of satisfaction from.
Thank you, Tim. Chris, come in. Yes.
just one thing, if it's on as somebody who's worked in what get called support functions, enabling functions, whatever you call them within in businesses, if there's anybody who's there who's working in a sustainability role, who's questioning, should I have a seat at the table? Do I deserve to be here transforming the business and steering the business and influencing the business? Then please stop, because it's businesses make an economic choice to curate expertise in particular functions. And if the business that you work in has made an economic choice to curate that expertise and have a sustainability function, it's because it matters to them, and it's because they believe that the best way to deliver what they're there to deliver as a business is by having that expertise in-house, curating that expertise and not dispersing it into a whole myriad of different places. So please have confidence. Please believe that you are there to drive the business, you are there to influence it, and that you're really adding value.
That's a great note on which to finish. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Sorry if we didn't get to your question, but thank you very much to a wonderful panel for a fascinating conversation.